Welcome to It's All Recruiting, the show that looks at everything through the lens of recruiting. I'm your host, Jim Stroud.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. Welcome to another action-packed episode of the podcast, It's All Recruiting. I'm your host with the most, Jim Stroud. Yay! Happy New Year. Happy 2016 to all my listeners. So glad you're there. So glad you're listening, because if you were not there listening, I'd be here talking to myself, which I often do at times. But not this time. No, this time I have a mystery guest who will help me to vent about the industry a bit. Mystery guest, if you would, please introduce yourself.
Hey, Jim, it's Dawn Rasmussen from Pathfinder Writing and Career Services. I'm a professional resume writer, but I'm also a career management speaker and an advocate for getting the HR and the careers industry talking to each other.
Thank you so much for being in my podcast. Do appreciate you.
Thanks for the invitation.
I was thinking about the recruiting industry, as I often do, and I'm sure as you do as well. And I was thinking about some of the different things that bother me from time to time, and how I hope in the new year I will see less of some things and maybe more some other things. One thing that I would like to see less of, and tell me how you feel about this, is the perception that some hiring managers have that people who are already working are somehow more skilled or more valuable than those who may have been laid off recently. Have you come across that kind of mindset in your side of the fence?
I have seen I've worked with a lot of job seekers that have found themselves out of work because of layoffs and things like that, and they feel like they've fallen off the merry-go-round, so to speak, and so they feel like they're not really in consideration or contention for jobs just because that they lost their job. And one thing from a resume writer and a career management coach's perspective, I do coach people, if that's a concern, then they should be engaging in their time where they're not working, is that they should be taking classes, getting involved in membership organizations, and even volunteering, just to show that they are still active, even if they're not possessing a current job. So it's one way to try to help wear down that barrier, but I think that's a big issue with hiring managers, is that they're a little afraid, thinking that someone who hasn't worked for a while is not up to speed, and I would disagree with that. Yeah,
that's actually one of my biggest peeves, because I've seen this. I mean, I'm not speaking of anyone recently, just going over the past 20 plus years, gosh.
Congratulations.
Wow, it's hard for me to even.
You survived that long. That's good.
Wrap my mind around that. But yeah, for just over a couple of decades, it's even worse. I've come across that mindset so often, and I think that the mindset comes from managers who think, well, if they're really good, the company would have done all they could to keep them. And that's just not the case. I mean, stuff happens. Recessions hit, the mergers or acquisitions, and people shift and things like that. So I just never really quite understood, and definitely never agreed, that someone who is laid off is somehow less skilled than someone who's still working. Just sort of drives me nuts. One thing that I would tell job seekers to sort of get around that, just sort of accent some of the advice you gave, is that I would say create a webinar, on whatever your expertise is, and then reach out to potential employers and say, hey, I'm giving this great webinar on whatever subject. Please invite all of your employees or all your people to come check out this webinar. It deals with a problem that is facing or plaguing the industry that particular job seeker is in. Tune in to this webinar for free and listen to my expertise. And then after they have given the webinar and said a bunch of really brilliant and wonderful things, they can then go through the attendee list and say, hey, I've noticed you came to my webinar. You have any questions that I can help you with? Or what's going on in your company? Is there someone like me can be of use to you? And that way you're showing your expertise, you're talking to potential employers, and you're sort of networking with just the right kind of people, because they're in the companies that you want to work for. What do you think of that?
I think that's a brilliant example. And, anything that you can do to demonstrate your ongoing expertise to your target audience is going to be really important. And, I did touch briefly on the volunteering piece. I mean, obviously creating your own webinar is great, but staying engaged and involved with your target industry membership professional organizations is a good idea, because you're still putting those skill sets in action usually through your engagement with those organizations, but it's also building that familiarity with the hidden job market that, people are going to say, did you hear that Susie got laid off or is leaving her job on Friday? And now there's a job opening, it's not even posted. So those are good things. And, the one thing that I would say that might counteract that a little bit is not everybody's very good at speaking out publicly, or may not have the technology proficiency to run their own webinar. I do think that that's something that everyone can benefit to go into some type of speaking training. So whether you join Toastmasters or something like that, anytime that you can enhance your ability to speak in front of groups and express your ideas concisely and clearly in a way that's meaningful to the target audience, it's going to benefit you. Whether you're talking to your boss or the president of the company or 2,000 people, that's an invaluable skill. So that could be a piece if you're a little scared, if the job seeker's a little scared about trying to create their own webinar. That might be a stepping stone before you create that webinar.
Good advice as well. Have you ever counseled someone to maybe embed a PowerPoint in their LinkedIn profile? Because I was telling a group of people this recently. I was saying how LinkedIn allows you to embed images and PowerPoints and other things into your profile, and they weren't in video, and they weren't aware of it. And I was saying that if you are shy, post your PowerPoint in there and show off some of your stuff there. What do you think of that?
I really think that LinkedIn is becoming that content central hub where people not only create their own profile information, but create it as a repository for all of their projects and representative PowerPoints and things like that. No, the only caveat to that, and I'm being the devil's advocate today, Jim, so apologize.
No worries.
There, but you should always be careful that you're not revealing proprietary or confidential information. Those PowerPoints, you don't want to go over and beyond where you're trying to over-impress your audience, where you're actually, compromising company information. So, keep that in mind, and remember that what goes on LinkedIn is seen by the whole world pretty much. So, and it could be searchable content as well. So just be smart. That's what I always say. But LinkedIn is a fabulous content platform that you can use as your centralized hub, or, other sites like about.me. You can create your own portfolios and things like that. So those are great ways to demonstrate your knowledge and expertise while giving insights to who you are, especially how you speak and things like that. So, those are great tools. Absolutely.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, too, it brings to mind something as well. We talked about how hiring managers, they tend to want, I guess, what they can't have or they think they can't have when someone's already working somewhere else. It somehow makes the fruit more exotic, so to speak. But
the grass is always greener, right?
Yeah. I wonder, could that really give job seekers a impetus? I don't know if it's the right word, but the encouragement to really market themselves online so that they can be found, so to speak, by the recruiters or hiring managers out there. For example, if a hiring manager happens to be reading a newspaper or a blog post or something like that, and they see that someone's being quoted in that article, they may say, wow, this person must be really smart because he's being quoted in this article or on this blog post or in a white paper. I mean, is that something that you see candidates try to do a lot of, or?
And this kind of falls into something that, is a big passion area for me, is that, quite frankly, and I think the recession we just dug ourselves out of, basically, really emphasize and clearly show that a lot of people don't do a very good job of marketing themselves. And, we're taught by our parents, don't boast about yourself. You can't do that. And, yet at the same time, if you don't tell them, they won't know. So a lot of people have been on cruise control, and that's why one of the biggest tragedies of the depression or recession that we had was that people lost their jobs and they had their knees cut out from underneath them, and they didn't even know where to start managing their career. They thought, they love me, I love them, we were doing great, and all of a sudden they gave me my pink slip, and oh my gosh, I feel so betrayed. And so I think that's a huge issue, and I really try to educate people that, you alone are in charge of your career. You can't go on cruise control anymore. You really need to be thinking about your next step. And it's not so much boasting, so to speak. It's more about owning and understanding your value and how you help organizations, and then communicating it to the decision maker. So if a company starts to get in financial trouble, are you keeping your boss informed about how you are positively contributing to the company? If they don't know, then you might be the first one at the top of the chop list. So it's a constant process of thinking about, where do I want to go? How do I want to add my skills? How do I keep showing value to the company and owning those accomplishments and tracking them so that you can really have a very clear case study of what you do to help the business. And that can help you either internally with your current company or any target companies as well, if you're looking outside the organization.
Yeah, it makes me wonder or think sort of like it's this commercial I saw on TV the other day called it's some kind of credit service, Credit Karma, I think it was. And they were saying, I was free to check your credit report. Just go to Credit Karma. And I know that some people, they check their credit report every now and then around tax season, I think, and other times. And it makes you wonder, how often do people, and this is maybe something that you and other resume writers may want to market or accentuate, how often do you update your resumes? I mean, you should do it like once a year, because you never know when something's going to happen and you're dropped or laid off or what have you. And people, I think, they wait to the last minute or when they're in a situation when they need to look for a job to actually start keeping up their resume, or updating their resume. So it could be like
huge problem.
Yeah, it could be an insurance thing. How often do people even keep up with that stuff? I'm wondering.
They don't, and that's another part of being aware. And I speak a lot, and so I talk to groups, and I'm talking about career management. Part of the piece of the career management, as I mentioned earlier, is keeping track of your accomplishments. So I just sort of jokingly do it, but I get everybody in the audience to raise their hand, and they actually take an oath that I swear I will keep track of all my accomplishments, so that I know what I did in the past few years. So that's the thing, is if they don't know, and it's creating a file, really, whether it's electronic or a hard file or whatever. It's like, what are your staff reports? What do they say? What do you any kind of recaps, project recaps, event recaps, whatever it is. And if there's any performance reviews, if there's any stock reports, anything that might be a way to gauge and measure your metrics of on-the-job performance, hopefully the employer has involved some type of measurement process. I know that's a whole other thing as far as, are performance reviews helpful or harmful, but we'll get into that later. But, just having some idea, like, how well are you performing your job? What's the expectation? Have you performed to that expectation? Whether you get something from your boss or if you have to look into your heart of hearts and know how did you help the company, but understanding and quantifying results is going to be really important. So having that as an ongoing narrative with yourself and also in a file, and realizing that you do need to articulate that. And really, you should be looking at updating your resume every 6 months at least, because, we forget stuff. We get so busy with our nose to the grindstone, we forget, we're on to the next project, and we kind of forget what we did in the past. And I think that, again, was emphasized by the whole recession, that when people lost their jobs, they're scrambling. They don't even remember what they did in the last year because they haven't kept records, and they've been so focused, like I said, moving on to the next thing, that they're kind of at a loss. It's kind of a fog, really. So it's something you need to stay on top of. That's so important, because if you can't articulate your value, nobody else is going to be able to see it either. You can't just dive into just a bunch of job duties. Employers going to be looking at resumes and your background to say, so what? Did you do it good? Did you do it bad? Give me some kind of context so that they can make a decision based on that and decide if that's going to be a fit for their needs.
Yeah. And that, when you say that, it reminded me of some advice I gave someone not too long ago. which is they were having difficulty trying to figure out what they wanted to be when they grew up, although they've been working for 10, 15 years, it seems like. And I said, well, one thing you may want to do is just think of 3 or 4 different things, jobs you think it would be great to sort of have if perfect world. And I said, then look on LinkedIn and find profiles of people who are doing possibly stuff you want to do. And then look through their career to see what were they doing, 2, 3, 4 jobs prior, and maybe model your next few steps in your career based on the profiles of people who you admire, So if I wanted to be, Bill Gates, whatever, I will pull up his LinkedIn profile and look at his career over the past 10, 15 years and say, okay, I see he worked there, and I see he volunteered over there, and I see he did this and that. Let me look for things I can do on my present-day job that can sort of imitate what Bill did at this stage in his career. That kind of thing.
And, I would take it one step further and just follow thought leaders. So, they have they're also looking ahead as well. So not just the past stuff, but follow thought leaders. And number 2 would be is to really do the informational networking and interviewing, because that's where you can have a sit down one-on-one with the person. Obviously you're not going to probably get a one-on-one with Bill Gates, but it's, thinking about, okay, so how can I approach this person? And, an information interview, as you and I both know, is not about finding a job. It's about getting information. So, and building a relationship as well. So, asking that person, maybe they have some advice that might be a shortcut to maybe some of their decisions that they've made in the past. And they can really provide some insights. Here's what you ought to do, or I think you're one step away from that. You're not quite there yet. So here's some other things I recommend you doing. So those informational interviews are so invaluable. And, obviously they're taking the time to help give you some freebie information. So obviously express yourself in a professional manner and by sending a thank you note for their time and that kind of thing. So they're a great resource, really.
Yeah, that's very good. It actually reminds me of some advice I give recruiters from time to time, is that they need to stay up to date with their industry, whatever type of industry they're recruiting for, especially from the viewpoint of their CEO and some of the things going on with the company. Because if the CEO were to say in an article or in a town hall meeting or whatever the case may be that, I've seen the future and it's all about widgets. So we're going to, widgets are what I'm looking at now. So I would tell the recruiter, well, the CEO is looking at widgets, but you need to understand what the widget industry is, because eventually you're going to have to recruit for people to support the CEO's vision,
Right, right.
And also see how it fits in with other industries, because if your CEO is not into widgets, but 3 or 4 of your main competitors are into widgets, you still need to know what widgets are, because you're going to be recruiting against them or recruiting the same type of people when the CEO says, okay, I'm into widgets now because everybody else is into widgets, that kind of thing. And I think job seekers should be doing the same thing, keeping up with what's going on.
Absolutely.
I noticed, too, in talking with some job seekers, is that a lot, and I see this around people who've been in the industry for an extended period of time, they are hesitant, or maybe it's hesitant or phobia, or just don't want to do it in terms of keeping up with the latest industry, because they've been doing something for so long a certain way that they don't want to know what they don't want to get into the next step of learning something new because they've done something the same way all the time. I mean, do you see that a lot? And I
see a lot of complacency, and so I always tell my clients when I'm working on their resume that I'm here to kick their butt. And so, I always tell them there's 3 major pieces to your career management, and part of this is, number 1, professional development. How are you staying on top of things? And there's 4 pieces to that. Number 1, skill gaps. If you're applying for jobs and you're seeing that you have a hole in your credentials, then don't sit there and wring your hands and say, poor me, I don't have that skill set. You need to go get that skill set. So don't be, you need to address all skill gaps. The second piece is really address skill updates, because everything is changing. And so it's like, how are you up to date on the latest technology or whatever it is that might be affecting your industry or maybe trends? And the third piece is thought leadership. This is where, how are you getting ahead and understanding what's coming up next, what's in the crystal ball, what's coming down the pipeline, so you can take those ideas and transition them into the company or a potential employer to help them meet the future needs. And the fourth thing, and this is rather optional, not everybody wants to be a leader or a manager, but really understanding that you need to focus on building your managerial quotient if that's where you want to go. How are you building your skill sets in terms of managing people, managing ideas and strategy and budgets and things like that. So there's a whole world of professional development. School doesn't end when you graduate and get your degree in your hot little hand. It's a lifelong process, and employers like to hire subject matter experts. So it's so critical that you need to be thinking ahead, act proactively, probably adding 1 or 2 things per year to your credentials, your resume. And, you don't want to get complacent. A lot of people have been. I mean, I've worked with so many resume clients that they simply put, they are just not staying on top of things. And so they have a big old blank spot there. And, that's fine. I'm not trying to criticize them, but if they truly want to be the competitive candidate and ultimately the best choice candidate, they need to show progression in there. And the same thing goes with industry connectedness. Are you a member of your industry's professional organizations? You need to be known by the company that you keep. It's where all the cool kids hang out, as we all know. But also, it's showing weight and gravitas that you're a mover and shaker within your own industry. And then the third piece is really, how are you involved with that organization? Are you just paying membership dues? Or are you a volunteer? Are you on a committee? Are you on a board? I mean, those 3 areas I just mentioned are just so mission critical. And so many people, I think it has a lot to do with a lack of education that they need to, it's not something they sort of stumbled in if they found it. It's not that anybody's ever said, hey, you need to pay attention to this. They've just sort of stumbled around. And so my job, I see, as the career management person, is to say, hey, wake up. You need to pay attention to these things. This will help you with your candidacy and help you move forward. And I think one of the biggest problems that kind of predates this is like college career centers. They're still telling people to write their resumes back in the 1970s format, and they are not helping these people who have just spent thousands upon thousands of dollars for their college education. What's happened is that the students get told, well, you need to put that you worked at a Baskin Robbins on your resume, and it's like, what about all of their class-related and classroom-related stuff that's actually relevant to their target career field? That's not being pulled out and highlighted, and giving representative example projects or whatever, field work or whatever it is. That's the problem. And so what happens is these new graduates arrive into the workforce. They have been given poor information about how to construct their career credentials. And that's, to date, that's their only contact with any kind of career advice, really, unless they're looking online, and there's all kinds of advice out there, good and bad. But so I think that's a huge problem that, career centers at colleges and universities, this also includes employment departments and workforce centers working with veterans, active duty military personnel transitioning to civil life, or even veterans, that kind of thing. It's just, there's a lot of misinformation. It's quite dated, and it's really not giving them the information that they need to move forward and really maintain an active career management mindset, and that's a huge problem.
Yeah, at the very
least. That's my soapbox.
That's okay. I like your soapbox, because I was going to say.
We're back on.
I was just going to say that to add to your soapbox was that at the very least they could go to YouTube and do a search for whatever industry they're in and see conference speakers who post their speeches on YouTube. I know going to a conference every other day, can be expensive after a while, but you can still get a lot of the benefit just going to YouTube and typing in your industry and putting in speaker and listen to conference speakers. I mean, it's the next best thing to being there. You still get the content. You don't get to network with the people there, but that's something that can be done and done easily. And not only that, but also if they have an iPod or either they don't, do a search for whatever industry keyword that they're into and add into the search the word podcast and listen to different podcasts about the industry and keep up with what's going on that way as well.
Yep, reading news articles, go if they have target companies, following them on LinkedIn and looking at what their news feeds are. And, absolutely. There's so many different I'm going to sound like a dinosaur now, but way back in my day, we had microfiche at the library and, with these interwebs that they've created. No, the internet is a great resource. But the problem, I think, to a certain degree, too, is to what degree you can go down the rabbit hole pretty easily, and then you end up getting a lot of information, and you start having a little problem trying to filter it. So, identify and know your trusted resources. Identify and know who the thought leaders are and who the regular leaders are, too, just so that you're getting your information from a trusted source. That's my advice on that.
Yeah. If you could put your hands around the neck of the recruiting industry and sort of shake it and say, listen to me on behalf of all job seekers, what would you be screaming in their ear, in the collective ear?
I realize that every company has a different need set, but, for job seekers, they are so frustrated because they're told to prepare their resume in so many different ways that they're just baffled. They get to the point of analysis paralysis. You've probably heard of that before. But,
sure.
One person will say, oh, you should do your resume this way. So then they change their resume. And then another recruiter say, no, I liked it the first way. Get rid of this and do this. So the job seeker's constantly chasing a moving target. I'm not saying that we need to have a standardized format for how credentials should be prepared, but it's just mind-boggling. And the other piece, too, is, the applicant tracking systems. There's so much discussion in the HR and recruiting community about how user-friendly, candidate-friendly they are, and they're really not. Most job seekers, their biggest concern is, once I submit the application, did you even get it? Number one. And
sure.
Number two is, now that you got it, what's the decision-making timeline? Because you're not the recruiter, the company that they're applying to is not the only one, chances are, that they're applying to. So, they may really want to go work at your company, but if your process is a lot slower than other companies, then they're going to probably take the first, depending on their circumstances, but probably take the first offer that they get, or at least the first best offer that they get, and it might not be yours. So you may have missed out on a really good person. And, they might have been willing to hold out for you. I don't recommend that because obviously there's no guarantees, but, a job offer in the pocket is better than not having a job offer in the pocket.
Sure.
Sure. But so I think there's just a lot of concern about the overall candidate experience. They feel lost. I know everybody talks about the black hole. I don't know of anybody who's really doing a great job of it personally, just from what I hear from job seekers. But, it's just the changing expectations. And my job is to try to keep my ear to the ground, find out what HR managers and recruiters are looking for, how they want it, and then try to do my very best to try to walk that thin line, because you're not going to please everybody. Whoever's the recipient of a resume, it's a subjective process. It's like whatever you prefer, whatever you've been trained to look for, whatever you like to see. Some people want to see color, some people don't. Some people want to see lots of fonts, some people don't. So it's such a mixed bag that, again, it just results in that paralysis for job seekers, and they're so frustrated. They go put so many hours and effort into creating a document that represents their career, and then at the end of the day, if it might be a minor little subjective thing on the recruiters, and that they just didn't like one little thing, and that throws them out of contention. So I guess that's the biggest thing. It's the biggest frustration, and they just want to know where they are in the process. That it's not fair to send this off and then it's like you never hear anything back.
So true. So I would love it if there was two things. One, if there was a standard for different types of resumes, and then so the companies say we accept standard resume standard 1-2X, whatever.
Right.
So they know exactly what type of resume they're going to receive, and that would make it easier all around. And then if there was another industry standard of ATS systems, where someone who has applied can say, they say, thank you for applying. You're applicant number 342. The recruiter has searched the ATS system 90 times for applicants in this system, let them know that they are actively searching it, and your resume came up 12 times, maybe. I don't know. That might open up a whole other can of worms.
Well, what I say is if Domino's can create a pizza tracker, then give you an update on where your pizza is, why in the heck can't they do that for job seekers? That would be the most wonderful thing in the whole wide world. So
it would be. You know what? It sounds like you have the makings of a great patent. You might want to get on that.
I don't. I've got too much other stuff going on. You can help out with that, Jim. You guys know what you were looking for. So,
well, I got to say the time flew by. I really enjoyed talking with you. Thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a great conversation. I'm sure we could go on for hours. So maybe those will be future broadcasts, right?
Yes, indeed. All righty. Well, thank you again. And everyone, if you have a question or you want to follow up, by all means, please send me a tweet. I'm at Jim Stroud, of course. You can also leave a comment underneath the podcast as well, and we'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can, okay? So until next time, happy 2016 to you, and I'll see you, or rather virtually see you, on the next It's All Recruiting podcast.
Thank you so much for listening. If you were not there, then I would be here talking to myself. So thank you for that. If you would, check out the links in the podcast description because they are there for you. Finally, if you love what you heard, hate what you heard, or not quite sure what you just heard, I want to know about it. Connect with me on Twitter at Jim Stroud, or LinkedIn, or Google+, or pretty much anywhere you find me online. I'm everywhere. Okay, enough of that. Until next time, one last word spoken 3 times to my people at Randstad Sourceright. Love, love, love.